All right, just a few little commercials to get ourselves underway while all of those get cooking. I was asked when I came in, do you still carry fossils in your pocket? And the answer is yes. One bit of dinosaur bone I brought home from England, and there's one in every pocket. It's just helpful for communication purposes. For those of you who listen to Vision Radio, if you don't get enough tonight, I'll be there 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, so call in with your questions or whatever if you don't have enough time to ask questions tonight. Basically, I've got 30 minutes plus a little time for Q&A, and then we have a meal out the back that you're all most welcome to. And I suggested that we do that topic tonight, a sovereign God in a climate of change. Because, I've just been on the road for 9 weeks in England, and the majority of places said, can you deal with climate? But of course, I just don't want to do it from my geological background. I don't want to do it from a pure scientific perspective. I said, let's have a look at the Creator and climate and the big picture. And of course, the other thing, well, I actually do carry some interesting things like dinosaur teeth, right? Because that's about the second most popular topic ever since I've got involved in this ministry. So we will try and cover those two things with a couple of punchlines and then hopefully a bit of Q&A. You will see our website there, creationresearch.net. And yes, I have been involved. Come on, machine, you're supposed to be working now. There we are. I have been involved in this for long enough to see the climate of attitudes to Christianity change immensely. But at the moment, that just came off my Google phone. University dumps professor who found polar bears thriving despite climate change. Well, I knew that because I travelled to Alaska. There are polar bears everywhere. I was carrying guns to stop them when we were out on a dinosaur dig, despite what the news said. When I was in the UK just recently, a grandfather came up to me, so I found, and he said, what should I do? My grandchildren are saying, Grandpa, you're a farmer, you've destroyed the planet. Your cows and pigs are ruining the environment. We're going to be vegan. We want nothing to do with farming at all. Interesting. And he said, what should I do? Social issues. Okay, the Bible. The prophet Elisha came to the people of Israel, to the soldiers and the king, and he said, here, you've got a problem. Your animals have run out of water. We've got a lot of farmers with that problem at the moment. This is what the Lord says. Make this valley full of ditches. For thus says the Lord, you'll not see wind, nor shall you see rain, yet the valley shall be filled with water, so you and your cattle and your animals may drink. There's no doubt about it. The Bible's not just about religion. It's about climate and rain and weather as well. And of course, if you like dinosaurs, wouldn't you love a pet one? But they're not around, it seems. What happened to them? I'm always grateful to the professor at Queensland University who said, John, I want you to do a thesis on the extinction of dinosaurs. This is the old popular meteorite bombardment. And yes, I'm grateful to the Lord. I've been able to travel to some of the big meteorite craters and check out the stories. They don't check out too good, by the way. No wonder the vet up the road said, here's my theory. Dinosaurs never went to the vet, and look what happened. Of course, my favourite one was this. Dinosaurs lived when marijuana appeared on the planet. And they got hooked. This is serious, by the way. It's in the literature. They got hooked on this, and they all got throat cancer and died. But the one thing that I was interested in all of these was that sooner or later, marijuana has to have a climate to grow in. Meteorite creates dust, climate changes. So what about suggesting the climate killed them off? We're going to cover all sorts of things tonight, so let me get you into this issue. Who can influence weather? Because Grandpa said his children blamed him for ruining the climate of the planet. We started with a Bible reading, thus says the Lord. That's what the prophet said. You need water? Dig holes in this valley. Tomorrow morning, it won't rain. You won't hear any wind. There'll be water everywhere. Have you read this portion? Because Elisha goes on and says, this is a simple thing in God's sight to do. Okay, don't be surprised. Back in Genesis, the God who created everything is the one who made water. He didn't need it to rain. There's no rain recorded till after to Noah's day. Who can influence the weather? The Bible is emphatic, the Creator does, beyond a shadow of a doubt. But I'll hit you from the other side, one you're not expecting, one that actually shocked me. Who can influence weather? Have you read the book of Job? And the Lord said to Satan, all that Job has in your power, you can do, but only do not lay a hand on his person. Remember that the record, Job, a very faithful servant of the Lord, known for his patience, and yet the devil wants to bring him down and God says, go for it. By the way, I hope you're glad this is probably not happening to you at the moment. I wouldn't have liked the Lord to give him permission to Satan to bring me down as bad as this guy did. And what's interesting, of course, is you read a little bit further and there's a catastrophe. A servant comes while he was still speaking, and then another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were in their oldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house, and it fell on the young people. Question, who sent the wind? Or haven't you thought, who can influence the weather? And the answer is anybody who's authorised. I wonder if you're authorised. We mightn't get that far tonight, but you can follow it up on creationresearch.net, click the fact file, and you can search climate. It's true. There's lots of things up there. I'd encourage you to actually also, early this year, we were asked to do a big seminar on the south side of Brisbane, and we did that program, a 2020 God's Eye View on Climate and Change. Everything involved in climate, not just the ones that are blaming farmers or industry or whatever. I'm going to be grateful to the Lord because we've managed to bring a few books out this year that are brand new. So if you like our research that we've been doing at Jurassic Ark on how fast caves form and how fast rocks and fossils form, have a good look at that. Part 2, twice as nice without the ice. A bit of a take on one of our popular sayings. You know, I had a guy at one of my conferences and he came up to me and he said, you know, have you ever wondered why our big computer company has never backed the climate change theory? I said, no, but I can see you're about to tell me. And he said, it's because our boss said, here's what I want you to do when this started to come into prowess. He said, I want you to take the current projections of climate and then I want you to put the computer models to work and trace it backwards and see if it matches any climate record anywhere. And we did that, and it doesn't match any climate anywhere. He said, forget it, it's rubbish. History versus computers. Let's check something out. In the UK just recently, this appeared on the BBC News. Mourners have gathered in Iceland to commemorate the loss of, however you say that in Icelandic, ... It's a glacier. This glacier was officially declared dead in 2014 when it was no longer thick enough to move. You don't go to Iceland too often? Well, I've been invited there. There's the glacier at the top, September 1986, on the top of a big volcanic mountain, and underneath it is the glacier in 2019. Now, don't forget, I had a ... in the middle. I was glad they allowed this guy to have his say. 150 years ago, no Icelander would have bothered the least to see all the glaciers disappear. I'm sure of that because I asked one Icelander, I said, why did you people settle in such a stupid place? It's so cold. And he said, when we first got here, it wasn't. Okay. Mourners gathered in Iceland to commemorate the loss of the glacier, ... What did I leave out? This glacier died at the age of about 700. You see, when the Icelanders arrived, it wasn't there. In fact, it was born in the 1300s and it died in the 2000s. Or didn't they tell you that on the media? They didn't, did they? The kids at school don't learn that. It's amazing. Most of the people who are evolutionists who reject God's word surprisingly want the world to stay the same. And they think they're in charge. Interesting. History versus computers. You can see the source. I downloaded this from the University of Leeds. They had a whole course on weather based on history. Look at that. It was actually higher in the 1200s and 1300s, temperature-wise, than it is in England today. What's interesting is the glacier began as the climate in England is recorded to begin plummeting. It's only 1,200 kilometres from England to Iceland. You know that? Or didn't they tell you at school that in the 1300s there was no ice, no free water in any direction around Iceland? Wolves could walk from Scotland to Iceland. It's in the history books, not in the current weather forecasts. And the glacier went again when the climate has got hot enough. Still hasn't got back to what it was in the 1200s. Okay, warning. The Bible is not just a book about religion. It's a book about God, it's a book about history, it's a book about climate, it's a book about murder, rape, gore, all sorts of things. And it also says, watch out for false knowledge. Some old translations, watch out for false science. That's just a Latin word for knowledge. Avoid the profane and idle babblings and contradictions. Now, some people have asked me how old I am. Brother Craig said, how long have you been in this ministry? A long time, many decades. And you see where there used to be hair? I'm old enough to have seen the climate do that. And I'm old enough to have noticed one thing. Every theory they taught me at Queensland University in the geology department has come and gone and been replaced by other theories, which so many Christians are trying to fit their Bible into. Bible hasn't changed. Let's check a few things out. Dead as a dodo saw. A dodo saw? Oh, dodos died out, correct? We killed them. Interesting. I wonder what happened to the dinosaurs. It's a serious, much more serious than dodos, because a grandmother came up to me recently and she said, what you said about dinosaurs was absolutely true. By the way, I'd just given one commercial about dinosaurs, about a book we've just produced, and I introduced it by saying, did you know that 30 years ago, the skeptics decided, this is an organisation, that the best way to undermine Christianity in the mind of kids is dinosaurs. A meteorite bombarded them. You don't even need to mention God, because the kids will realise, hey, that's not in the Bible. I know that because, you see, she said to me, my grandson used to come to this church until he was 10. And then one day he came home from school and he said, Grandma, the Bible lies. Dinosaurs turned into birds. He's never been back. Grandma, grandson, dinosaurs. Let me sneak a subtle commercial in here. We have a book table out the back, by the way. I guess it's not so subtle, is it? That's a book on the book table out there that we bought out this year. What happened to the dinosaurs? Interesting question. But you see, have you realised that the world uses things like this to undermine the gospel in the eyes of young people? So this is for the young and the young at heart. I mean, look, these are my grandkids on a trip to Jurassic Ark. You've got a brochure as you came in on Jurassic Ark. Come and visit us sometime. The Aussie Creation Museum. And if I can make it work, do you realise this book is interactive? We had two guys come and say, hey, listen, we can make your books live. We can put 3D animation and you can use your iPhone or your iPad, and wherever you see that little footprint, let me see if I can show you what it does. Can I have a microphone from down there, please, Lex? Because you see, we didn't connect me up for sound tonight. We didn't want anybody tripping over anything. Let's see if we can make this work here. There we are.
Welcome to Jurassic Ark. Please keep your seatbelt on at all times in a moving vehicle, and do not feed the fossils.
So not only will you like to come to Jurassic Ark, you can have it come to you in the book, and the kids love it because it comes... Oh, by the way, you can't download it onto your phone. We insisted on that, so the kids have to learn to read books. Far more valuable than just having iPhones in your head all the time. By the way, have you got the point tonight so far? The Bible said that God told the people, you want the climate to change? Ask me. I'm going to fill the valley with water because I can do that sort of stuff. And we live in a world that says we can do that sort of stuff, or we've ruined the stuff. You want a biblical view tonight? There's a verse in the New Testament, if you're really concerned about what happened to the dinosaurs, it's the same thing. You can figure out what happens to sparrows. Because Jesus said there's not one falls to the ground without me knowing it. Amazing. Scientists refrain from considering God's actions in their work. Now, it took me a long time to figure out that we were trying to have a godless view of the history of the planet. The science teachers have now gotten so bold, they've declared that in this state, in the entire Western world, we are deliberately leaving God out. In fact, scientific theories are explanations about aspects of nature without reference to God. Or didn't your kids learn that? No, they keep that a public secret. Let's try and do the reverse. What happens when you put God's word back in the mix? I'll show you. Oh, I know you've never read that version of the Bible there, but it's a summary in graphical form of all the lifespans of the people from Adam to Moses, from Genesis chapter 1 all the way up to Exodus chapter 35. Do you see that Adam lived till he was 930? Moses dropped dead when he was 120. By the way, you're on the wrong side of Moses if you're worried. So there we are. Application. Have you ever wondered why Adam lived so long? Perhaps we could ask a due question. I've become rather notorious for telling people that you only get the answers to the questions that you ask, and if you don't ask the right questions, don't expect the right answers. And the God of the Bible said, you'll love me with your mind, you love me with your heart, you love me with your soul, you will think. Question. Given that you know Adam lived to be nearly 1,000, how big would a 1,000-year-old croc? I took that picture last week. I know one thing, he wasn't 1,000, and I know he wasn't 100, because the little label in the crocodile zoo told me that, right? You thought I was brave, didn't you? No, he was all in a big cage, etc. Interesting enough, we have many reptiles on the planet today that are still here, but you know one thing about them, they've changed. They haven't evolved, they've changed. Meet my mate Ralph. Meet a brass model of a tuatara lizard. We're at the Tuatara Research Station and right on the southern tip of New Zealand, where they still live today. This one was found as a fossil that size in Germany, so please don't think tuatara lizards are indigenous New Zealand. It's the only place they're left. That's how big they are today. Pick them up in your hand. And I spoke to the world expert and I said, what do you know about tuataras? He said they're like most reptiles. They grow every day of their life as long as they live. They grow pretty fast for the first 25 years, then they slow down. Then they'll live for another 70 years and drop dead around about 100, around about half a metre long. Question, how old was he? Or didn't they ask that question at school? You see, if you don't ask the right questions, don't expect the right answers. Of course, unless you've got extra help, don't expect the right answers even if you do ask the right questions. You discovered that, didn't you, Claire? Right? I mean, Claire, didn't you love that testimony? And yet she knows she doesn't know all the answers. That's why we're saying let's put God into the mix. We know a lot about crocodiles. There's one there, compared to me. I'm the old croc, it's the living croc. No doubt about it. Here's an even older croc. Or wasn't that in your high school textbook? You see, you learn about molecules evolving into people, and the real evidence is exactly the opposite. If you can't get to grips with how big that is, let's put it into scale. There's a 100-year-old croc. There's me. There's Methuselah croc. Yeah? You see, we know that crocodiles grow every day of their life as long as they live. The older they live, the bigger they get. And you and I are never told that. Put it into context, the real history of weather. I know the Bible's got God in it, the Bible's got salvation, the Bible's got spiritual things, and the Bible's got weather. There was no rain. There was only warm and cool. There was no ice till after the flood. There was no drought. And we'll bring up Abraham in a moment. And today we live in an erratic climate, but it's been erratic since Moses' day. Amazing. So let me give you a suggestion, an excellent suggestion. You see, we're not going to cover everything because my thesis was 100 pages long on what happened to the dinosaurs. This is one that you need to consider. That's a robotic model of the little baby dinosaurs hopping out. Fabulous stuff. But the one thing you rarely learn about dinosaurs is that, like most reptiles, their sex that they hatch at depends on the climate. Cool temperatures lead to boys. Warm temperatures lead to girls. Aren't you glad it doesn't happen that way, Mum? For us? Amazing. By the way, do you realise when you look at the history of the world through God's glasses that He's given you in the Scriptures, when the Bible talks about Job and says, where did the ice come from, Job? That meant that the ice was already in the Middle East. Job knew that it came. He didn't know where it came from. He didn't know the answer to the question. We know it's still here. Question, you're a big reptile and for 100 years you only have boys. Tell me what's going to happen next. Yeah. Or were you never allowed to think in that suggestion? There's lots of things we could talk about tonight, because if there's plenty of ice, there's not enough food. If there's not enough food, other creatures are going to start eating you. You're a big creature, you need a lot of food, you're going to run out of food, etc., etc. So start thinking. Love God with your brain. And in fact, come across one thing. My family comes from Scotland. Do you realise the last record of a flying dragon in Scotland is in about 1450? And all through Europe and North America, all the records of dragons look like dinosaurs, correct? They all stop about the same time as Europe plunges into the cold. It's interesting when you go looking for evidence in science, you have to ask, what is evidence? How do I know? Right at the end, we're going to give you a Q&A time in about 5 or 10 minutes, and you'll be able to go out the back and have a look at questions. If you don't get your questions asked, there's new answer books. There's even kids' books on dinosaurs and elephants, and they're animated. You will love them. Have a look, because you and I need to train the kids up using a biblical perspective, right from the little ones on. Last section for tonight, a climate check. Question. What have the following got in common? Noah at age 602, Abraham when he went to Egypt, Joseph at age 39, Jacob at 130 years old. Normally I try and run a competition, but our time is short tonight. The answer is simple: climate change. You see, you and I live in a world that says this is new. No. You see, Abraham, why did he go to Egypt? What happened to Noah? Well, God told Noah, day and night, cold and heat, winter and summer will happen from now on till the world ends. There'd been no summer before Noah's flood. There'd been no rain. Noah's flood was a massive climate change. And the climate after that, well, cold and heat, winter and summer, rain and drought. By the time you get to Abram, who becomes Abraham, he went down. Can you imagine needing to leave your country because the whole country was involved in a drought? Long enough so your herds can't survive. You're rich enough to go to another country. You see, Abraham went from there down to there. The Nile kept running because it's watered from down here. Interesting. And you say, is that only in the Bible? Years and years ago, I came across the fact that you can read it in all sorts of literature. Even the secularists say around about 4,000 years ago, the climate in the Middle East plummeted from being moist all the way through to being dry, right across the Mediterranean. And yes, we even find the dust from the Middle Eastern deserts blowing right across the bottom of the Mediterranean. And you can read about it in National Geographic. They just don't like to go too far towards Abraham, but you'll find his name mentioned in there. Amazing. Interesting, just last week, did you read the news about Egypt finding 30 coffins stacked 10 in a heap under the sand? Okay, said they were 3,000 years old. They're wooden coffins. The mummies were in wonderful shape. They weren't protected in a stone tomb. Come on, are you thinking? Any builders in here? Tell me what happens to wood if you leave it in the sand and it rains. Doesn't matter if you have 100 years or two, it's going to rot. These are in perfect shape. That means from just after Abraham to now, the climate in Egypt has been pretty much exactly the same, no matter what's happened to it elsewhere. So let's get to the real point of tonight. Abraham went to Egypt. Joseph at age 39 was in Egypt. Jacob at 130 was in Egypt. Why? Why? I mean, why did you come tonight? Did you read the advertising? Did a friend invite you? What's your big picture of this? I'll give you a clue. You see, who told Joseph to go and tell Pharaoh there'd be 7 years of plenty? Stack it up, man. Then there'll be 7 years that are so rotten, everyone will come and buy stuff off you and you'll be even richer. Oh, he didn't say it in those words, but that's the end result. Okay, the answer is God revealed this, first of all, to Pharaoh in a dream that Pharaoh didn't comprehend, and Joseph was the one who God used to make the dream understandable. God has said this several times, Joseph said, so you would know that this is going to happen. What is it? It's a prophecy of climate change. Fast forward. Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Pharaoh, Exodus. Are you catching the trend? Okay, can I encourage you young people? I know you love looking up Bible verses on your iPhones. You can find Ezekiel 37:4 faster than anybody else on the planet. Do you know where it is in the Bible? In the big picture? Okay, Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Pharaoh, Exodus. Next clue. An angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph and said, go to Egypt. Go to Egypt. Why? Well, you can read all about it in Matthew chapter 2 and Hosea chapter 11. So that the prophecy, my son will be called out of Egypt, will come true. Have you ever realised that Abraham went to Egypt thousands of years before? There was a drought in Egypt during Joseph's time. Jacob had to bring the people of Israel down, and then they would be there, and then they would be called out of Egypt, because Jesus was planning a saviour for you and me and for Claire and for Nicola, etc. Never thought about that? Okay, why did you come tonight? Is it because a friend invited you? Is it because you saw our fancy, expensive advertising, which we didn't do? Is it because you just heard about the topic and you're interested in this? Because perhaps I should give you a bigger picture. You're here tonight for the same reason Paul said that to the people in the ancient Greek town of Athens. God has made all nations, you Greeks, us Jews, you people here tonight, from one man, Adam. Forget the theory of evolution. It's designed to destroy your confidence that God has a purpose and plan for you. He's made you to live on earth at the time and in the places he appointed. Now, Serrani's not exactly an English name, so where do you lot come from? Right? Yeah, Italy, that's right. But you're here for one reason in Australia. My dad came from Scotland. You know why? So that I would become a Christian. God has made all nations from one man to live on earth at the time. You're here tonight because God is a sovereign God, not only over climate, and he could fill the water in that valley with no trouble at all. One word from him, he made water in the first place. Filling valleys with water is no trouble to him at all. Saving you is no problem for him. He's got you here tonight so that, you will know. Did you hear the testimonies? I mean, have you struggled like the young man? How about Albert's testimony? I've known Albert for a long time. I've got a list of faults that long, if you want to know. And he could probably do the same for me. But in reality, you see, we're not saved because we're good enough. We're saved because Jesus was. And you're here tonight so that you can know for sure that you can be saved from your sin, as well as know for sure there is a place called hell and you need a way out of it. Okay, let me take 2 minutes now, and we're right on time just about. Do you see this good-looking guy there? Do you see me? That's John, that's Joseph, and I've been in England with him for the last 9 weeks, and I know I only got home a week ago, and I'm still sort of fuzzy from jet lag. Then I'm off again on Tuesday to the USA to give him some more training. Oh, the guy in the middle, he's from the European Union. It's true. It's Neanderthal man. It is, from Germany. I've been there to check him out. But I'll tell you what, will you pray for Joseph particularly? I've been training him in preaching for the last 9 weeks in the UK. He's been doing really well, and we've been collecting lots of fossils. He went to university when he's 15, and he's just finished 2 degrees, and you can praise the Lord. The Lord is raising up young geologists like this to be involved in what we do. But it's the change in lifestyle for a young man who could be making a fortune in science in Korea. You need to pray for him that the Lord will provide for him. I share on our church website some of the miraculous things that God has done. But Joseph's aim is the same as mine, is the same as Paul when he wrote to Timothy. Watch out for false knowledge, whether it's about climate, whether it's about society, whether it's about politics. It leads you astray. If you think the world's climate depends on you, then don't be surprised that when your kids say, Grandpa, you've ruined the planet, either you or they commit suicide. You have noticed the increasing number of suicides amongst farmers? Because if God's not in charge, you know you're not. Beware of false science, it leads you astray. You like the flip side in Scripture? Real science points you to Christ. Oh, it doesn't save you. It just says, signpost, signpost, God did this. That's what it says. The world was created in 6 days. You sinned in Genesis chapter 3 in Adam, and aren't you glad Jesus came to die for your sin? Real science. There, Jesus. Okay, the rest of this is available on DVD out the back. Talk to my darling wife. She's just there. She's the pretty lady I married many years ago. She can tell you how long we've been involved in Christian ministry, well over 3 or 4 decades now. It's your chance. I'm going to give you a chance to ask me a few moments of questions. We'll try and have 5 minutes or so. You can grab me out the back, and no prizes for guessing what other pockets I've got the fossils in. Anybody got any questions? And you will have to sort of speak. Are you going to run a microphone around, Les? Oh, that's good. Young man down there, Jacob, thank you. Wait till he gets to you with the microphone.
So I was just wondering, so there was a particular sentence you said about people trying to fit their Bible into the idea of climate change, and clearly there is some evidence against climate change. Mm-hmm. And I feel like as Christians for quite a while we have kind of leaned into the against climate change side. Do you think that has been at a detriment to a more biblical approach to industry where we are a little bit more conservative and less wasteful and less polluting, even if it's not in a climate change sense?
Okay. Can I warn you about how clever the devil is? That's why we started with the reference from Peter, right? He's subtle, he's silent, he's hidden, and he uses falsehoods that he claims are true. Since Noah's flood, the climate has changed up and down. Climate change is a fact of history. What they really mean is a more politically acceptable term than global warming, which turned out to be a fudge factor. I was in England when the Prime Minister then was quizzed about this because all of their predictions were not working. And he said, one must not confuse climate with weather. What? You know? No wonder he got booted out. But in reality, his comment was based on a good literary guy who back in the 1930s says, climate is what you want, weather's what you get. So to answer your question, Christians should always have believed in climate change since God told Noah it'll be hot, it'll be dry, it'll be cold, it'll be winter, it'll be summer, it'll be rainy, it'll be dry, etc. from now until the world's end. What we need to look is to say, okay, is it us who's using climate, or is it us who's making climate, or has God got something to do with this? I'll give you an example of the extreme application, because in this last few months, as we've had a lot of dry in the country, I've had people ask, issues, please pray for rain. Now, I'll tell you what my first thought is many times when I get asked this. I wonder if we should be like Elijah and pray for 3 years and 5 months more drought till the people get broken. All right? So the same God who sends the rain is the God who sends the drought, and he always has a purpose for it. The first purpose you read about is to save us from our sins, and he still uses weather to judge and to bless, to drive us, to convict us. And so the answer is pray for climate change, right? The other opportunity, 5 weeks ago, a church asked me to deal with this in England, and I said, fine. We had an hour and a half to do it, and it was great. And I said, I'm going to give you a challenge. My house in Australia and our Jurassic Ark Museum is really dry. I said, I want you people to pray for, a couple of inches of rain because we need it. I was pleased to say that just last Tuesday, before I left England, I was back in that same region. I said, would you like some news? We had 100 mils of rain at Jurassic Ark, right? And we had about 80 mils at our place. So Thrillsville, God actually is involved in hearing our prayers about that. Climate change, yes, it's really changed in Jurassic Ark in the past few weeks, right? So yes, climate change, push it, but man's sovereignty over it, against it. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I'm not arguing the point of climate change.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more arguing the idea of like the more biblical principle of like prudence and like being more conservative. Like when we do approach things like not just throwing rubbish out wherever and kind of trying to be a bit more sustainable, not arguing a climate change kind of.
Well, I think you probably would like what the Director General of the United Nations Committee on Climate said. We can't solve this problem because I've concluded the real problem here is greed. Right? The real problem is greed, and we're not equipped to deal with that. All of the issues you raise are consequences of economy and greed. If you want to know how to manage environment, come and visit our place where we started out with a barren cattle property, and now there's thousands of trees on it, and it's beautiful. So you can achieve all the above, but the real problem that you're talking about is involved in greed and industry. Only Jesus can sort that one out. One more question, up the back.
Thanks, Mr. Mackay. It was really good. Just curious. So obviously, as you have said, history has pointed that climate change has been obviously existent for however long the globe has been existent. Why is it such a huge issue within the past 2 or 3 years? Like, why has it been brought up to something that even young kids nowadays like striking out of school and saying, we need to stop doing whatever we're doing?
Okay, first of all, history, then a biblical hit between the eyeballs. The little bit of history, I remember when the ozone layer hole was first found in 1985, right? And the theory was immediately our refrigerators were causing this by the use of CFC gases, right? And so they spent a fortune actually forcing us to buy new refrigerants, new refrigerators, etc. Very few people took any notice of the scientists who said CFC is heavier than air. It can't get up there, right? Now, when you go a little bit further on, in 1988, which you never read about, the hole shrank, right? And it shrunk again this year to the smallest it's ever been. But in September, it was huge, right? And so it's gone up, down, up, down, up, down. And the fact is, we haven't got a clue if it was even there before 1985. And neither did you read about the thing being small now. It's just embarrassing news. And it's been embarrassing for the past 20 years, so they needed something else to actually bring you under global control. I say that because there are many people who like one world economies and that, and if they don't succeed with this issue, they'll try another issue because they want to be sovereign as well. But if you want the biblical hit between the eyeballs, remember when God told the people of Israel, you turn away from me and children will lead you. You turn away from me and women will rule over you. Oops, sorry. Politically incorrect. But that is the warning God gave. Tell me, how old is that young lady who sails around the world in huge, very wealthy yachts? Didn't she just have a beetle named after her? What an honour. That Greta Thunberg girl, who's never lived long enough to see the climate hardly change at all. And neither does she even ask, hey, this yacht is made of fiberglass. Fiberglass is a petroleum byproduct that I'm supposed to be opposing, right? So therefore, what you find is you find many young people taking a lead, and one reason is simple, their parents haven't. Particularly the men haven't. You hear that, guys? I was in a church once on a camp and someone said, you're opposed to women preachers. What's your reason for that? When we send so many women out to the mission field. I said, I'll tell you why I said that. I said, because you men are sitting here on your fat backside paying for women to do your job. Yeah, I'm known for that sort of thing, but it sort of stimulates conversation. So anyway, I'm 100% behind the women missionaries that we support, but in reality, so many men are using them as an excuse, and the same is true here. If the men of God taught the whole counsel of God, including, Adam and Eve and sin and what happened to the weather in Noah's day, right up to, hey, global warming for eternity, in a place called hell, then I think you'd have a lot less of this problem. So hopefully that's helpful to you. I'll be out the back. Mrs. Mackay, you've got a credit card machine, I believe. That helps the ministry and all of that. Craig, back to you.